OG Anunoby is a New York Knick. It's the Just Basketball Show, a bonus YouTube exclusive reaction show to the first trade of the NBA season, and it is a big one. Somebody we did not know would even change teams because of a stubborn executive and a prolonged reset is headed to the Big Apple in exchange for RJ Barrett heading home and Immanuel Quickley. I'm Brendon Kleen. That over there is Chris Manning. Welcome to the Just Basketball Show. If you're finding us for the first time here on this bonus show, don't forget to hit subscribe here on YouTube. Hit the bell. Get a notification when a new show goes live. Comment your thoughts on the deal. We have a lot to get to. Chris, let me read the full details of this trade, and then I will kick it to you for your reaction to this surprise move, a December NBA trade. All of these things are crazy to me, but Knicks receive OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, and I believe coming in after this tweet was constructed, Malachi Flynn, also headed to New York.
Sure.
Former first-round pick, backup point guard. The Raptors receive RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, and one singular second-round pick. This is a very Masai Ujiri package, I feel like, Chris. This gives Masai the way that it was done in secret. There was no bidding war to be had. There were no leaks or driving up of the price. Let's take the first good offer we like. Let's get the Canadian kid and a guard to help us out, and we'll get a pick in there. Sure, why not? And the Raptors part ways with their 3-and-D forward that they had been reluctant to give up for months, if not years.
This is such an interesting trade to me, Brendon, in the sense of, could Toronto have done better a year ago for OG? Like, would they have been better off getting however many firsts they could have gotten from whatever team that was looking for a wing, whether it be Memphis or somebody else? Could they have taken this offer from the Knicks and called up the Thunder or the Pelicans or someone and been like, hey, you have all these picks. This is our offer from the Knicks. Would you like to give us picks instead of players? And yet I really like particularly to me the Quickley part of this for them. Like, to me, that's almost the most interesting part of this trade is Immanuel Quickley getting freed from the shackles of Tom Thibodeau not playing him enough minutes and getting to play with Scottie Barnes. Like, that to me is like the most fun basketball short-term, long-term outcome of this whole trade. But yet I still do wonder, like, did Toronto, like, wait too long, and what are the ripple effects from this? And what does this also, like, what does this mean for the Knicks too? Is just like, I don't know how much better this makes them. I'm willing to be convinced. I think it makes them more of a pain, but does it raise their ceiling? Does it limit future moves? There's so much, I think, for us to unpack here. Do you want to start with Barrett and Quickley? Are you as gung-ho about Quickley being the real coup for them among the players in this trade?
I think he is, because of the fact that they needed a player like him so badly, right? I think one of the frustrating things about Toronto this season is, there have been some changes of what and who they are as a team, but because they didn't change the roster all that much and they made the trade for Jakob Poeltl as Nick Nurse was on his way out the door, Darko Rajakovic, however you say his name, I always feel bad that I'm butchering that, he has not been able to change the structure and style of this team as much as you would have liked because of the roster being the same. So I like that Quickley comes in along with Schroeder now, Barnes starting to elevate his game out to the perimeter more, and you start to see the makings of what a different version of this type of team could be like that isn't so, pound it into, an ISO or a post up and play off of that, and big playmakers constantly, racking up high usage. We can talk about subsequent moves to get closer to that, but I think that's why the Quickley part of it excites me, because he feels like he could really elevate their team. You just look at, they recently made a starting lineup change to bring Gary Trent into the starting unit, and I believe they benched Dennis Schroeder. So that all feels right. The part of it that doesn't make sense and the part of it that makes the Barrett fit worse, aside from all of our questions about what RJ Barrett is ultimately going to be as an NBA player in already, midway through his career, basically, is you're running into the same fit problems that you just saw and will continue to see with Barnes and Siakam, with Barnes, Siakam, and Anunoby, and Pirtle, and on down the list. I don't get the idea of putting RJ Barrett into this situation because I think it will clog everything up in the same way we've seen repeatedly. So it's like one guy provides somewhat of an answer, the other guy asks the same questions all over again, and that part of it confuses me. Did they just go for him because he's from Canada, Chris?
Well, he maybe, but like here's the other thing about this that at least I can talk myself.
Wiggins is available, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you could trade Siakam for Wiggins, and you could still do it. You could get 2.
There you go.
It's still there. You could make Canadian national team. You just gotta then get hung up on by the Nuggets when he asked for Jamal Murray. That's like the real
exactly.
That's the real coup d'etat to all this. But the Barrett thing to me is I'm not a big Barrett guy. I mean, you can look at his stat sheet and just see inefficient year after year, high usage. You're not getting a lot of bang for your buck all the time with him. There are certainly flashes. He certainly was a guy that came in obviously with a lot of talent, a lot of pedigree, and that talent is still largely there. The part of him that I find interesting with Toronto is, do they look at him as okay, I can fix him. We trust our player development. Raptors out of 5 is, I think, considered one of the best G League programs. Not saying RJ Barrett's going to go to the G League, but they have the player development infrastructure. They have a coach who is, I think, someone at least about player development more than anything else. Is this a way to get him out of New York, which I don't think has the best track record of player development, and Tibbs, who I don't think is necessarily a player development guru kind of coach. Those are not his strengths as a coach. And you can bring something new out of him with Scottie Barnes, with Quickley, maybe a little more, no Julius Randle on the floor to kind of eat up some of the space that Randle might want to attack. I could talk myself into that. I'm not super optimistic about it, and you're paying Barrett's contract through 2027, and it's not an insignificant amount of money, even if they now have cap space to do something with, even if a lot of it probably just goes to Quickley. But I could at least talk myself into okay, we can rehabilitate RJ and say our system and him being at home is going to be good for him, and we can get something out of him maybe the next. I could talk myself into that if I was feeling super optimistic about it, or if I had to go to a press conference as Masai Ujiri or their front office and explain what I just did.
Yeah, but the problem is, I don't think that this environment is okay. Yeah,
I agree.
Coaching staff, change of scenery, sure. But basketball-wise, if Julius Randle and an ISO point guard like Brunson and a traditional non-shooting center, all these aspects of what New York was didn't work for him, then why would the Raptors? And the other part of it too with this Barrett swap is a lot of times with teams that are kind of trying to reset, right? And looking down the barrel of an extension for Anunoby like the Raptors were, what you would see them prioritize is, let's get some younger players whose salary we can determine, and maybe some picks. And yeah, maybe that ends up meaning you don't get quite the same breadth of a package, right? Maybe you don't get two rotation players and picks and because it's just really, in theory, half a season of Anunoby, but you at least get to control your own destiny. We know Quickley's about to get re-signed, as you mentioned. RJ Barrett is already under contract for 3 seasons after this one. So that part of it really confuses me as well. And Bobby Marks had a tweet from ESPN, Chris, of the breakdown of what each guy's making now, and obviously we know Quickley and Anunoby are going to get paid. The Raptors could end up making less money or paying less money. Sorry, the Knicks could end up paying less money after this deal with the Raptors than they would have if they had just kept Barrett and Quickley. So you could make the case that they got the best player in the trade and maintain the most salary flexibility all for the cost of 1 second-round pick. And the other aspect of the Quickley side of this, as much as we like him in Toronto and like him as a player, Chris, is it just did not seem like he was long for New York. He's also a guy at last deadline who was in rumors. So it's not even really like the Raptors pried some kind of glorious asset from the Knicks that they were, dead set on keeping. Feels like they were happy to use Quickley in a trade if it meant upgrading something else about their roster. So we can get to the on-court with the Knicks because I think that is ultimately what will make or break how we feel about this. But from a value standpoint, from a sort of, put your GM hat on standpoint, I don't see a case for the Knicks not being the clear winners of how all this played out.
Yeah, I will just say I think Quickley and Scottie Barnes is going to be a ton of fun. I think Quickley's going to get to play more minutes. I think he should just start for them and get a bigger role than he's had in New York. I think the chemistry he is going to have, I think, pretty organically with Scottie Barnes and what that's going to mean as a structure for their offense, not really so much for this year, but for next year and the year after and the years to come. I think that is really good for Toronto. I think that is something that really excites me because I think those two guys are just going to fit really well together, and I'm just a big Quickley guy. I mean, he's uber efficient. He's not playing enough. He's a smart defender. I think you put him with a lead creator who isn't another guard and is maybe a little less like dribble happy as good as Brendon is as he can be at times. I think that's going to be good for him. I think this environment is going to be really fun for him in a way that excites me if I'm Toronto. I agree with you. This is more about the Knicks getting OG Anunoby than it is Immanuel Quickley going to the Raptors. But I am very excited to dial into some Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley era Toronto Raptors and then what they decide to do with the rest of that roster. I want them to play 5 out a lot. I know they just paid Jakob Poeltl, which I feel like we mentioned almost every episode that Jakob Poeltl got paid. I feel like that's like a big
who's the out of the center spot for them? They don't really have that guy. Yeah. So I maybe this is the first move toward that, right? But Siakam doesn't shoot threes either, so even if they kept him, it's not quite that. But yeah, I agree. You're starting to see the makings of what the roster could look like, dating back to last draft where they take Grady Dick. Still have Gary Trent on this roster, although it seems like they're not really close with an extension on him, so maybe he ends up leaving. But Schroeder, now Quickley, Dick, Scottie Barnes, whatever the rest of their kind of front court rotation starts to take form as, I guess Barrett has to probably be in that mix. It starts to, again, take shape of a Darko Rajakovic team much more than him just coaching Nick Nurse's squad, which I think is good. But
so let me ask you this: is OG a meaningfully different? Is he a meaningful upgrade for the Knicks? OG has been talked about as a long time as a guy who wants to do more, a guy who was in the Defensive Player of the Year running last season for a bit, who has a really high reputation for what he is, and I think he is really good. But is this like a trade that makes the Knicks meaningful better? That takes the Knicks who are in a very tightly contested East right now. They are, I believe, 6th or 7th. I'm looking right now. They're 7th in the East right now. They're in the play-in right now. 17-14, half a game behind the Cleveland Cavaliers, a game and a half behind Toronto and Miami, who are 4-5. Miami and Orlando, at 4-5. Does this make them a team that you are like, I'm now more confident that they're a top 6 team that can maybe give one of those upper echelon teams something of a run? Like, what does this actually mean for how good the Knicks are right now? Is to me is what I want.
Yeah, I don't personally think of it a lot as like, could they push X, Y, or Z team? I just in a vacuum did get better to me. The answer to me is yes. I think a lot of the time, if you read executives quoted in certain NBA insidery stories, Chris, or you listen to former executive types talk about trades in the media, they have this way of boiling it down that I kind of appreciate and almost try to do myself more and more, which is they upgraded from blank to blank is a lot of the time what you'll hear them say. from that point of view, this deal was the Knicks upgrading from RJ Barrett to OG Anunoby, and that makes them a better team. I think what Quickley does is a little bit more replaceable than what OG Anunoby does. And we know when we talked about the Knicks making a deal last week on our Christmas episode, coming off of their win over the Bucks, we spent the whole thing talking about the precarious position the Knicks were in from a trade standpoint, because something you already alluded to, whatever's left in this trade is after this trade might not be enough to get the next thing. So we said, okay, you either do a piecemeal thing now or you wait till the summer and try to do a Godfather offer for a star. They did the piecemeal thing, and I think they chose the right version of that deal because Josh Hart, Barrett himself, we've seen, even DiVincenzo, we've seen this type of guy earn Thibodeau's trust and make an impact on the team. RJ Barrett, despite what you might think watching him at times, never earned Thibodeau's trust, never really lived up to his potential physically and, obviously hype-wise as a defender. They've been worse with him on the court defensively most of his career, and he doesn't force turnovers. He doesn't really pop. He doesn't blow stuff up. He doesn't change games as a defensive player, whereas Anunoby does. You're talking about one of the better wing forward defenders in the NBA, in my opinion, in OG Anunoby. And so the ability to throw him out there in big or small lineups and not super have to worry about him offensively, although we can talk about if this is a place where he can elevate his game like he's been rumored to want to do. I like that. So I think it does make them better. And to get that guy also on the same timeline as Brunson is even better. So again, I think the Knicks did really well here, and I do think Anunoby makes them a more formidable opponent. What do you think about his offensive opportunity here? Do you think this is an environment where he can take more reps and get to do a little more than maybe he did in Toronto?
I think with no Quickley, the fact that Quickley went out in this trade, and let's say not Grimes, that it's the other guy on this team who really creates and plays with the ball in his hands on the perimeter for the Knicks, and obviously Barrett as well. There's no doubt that there's something of an opportunity here for OG. I think it's kind of put up or shut up time, I think, for him, Brendon, as far as finding out, what he is as far as an offensive guy. We've heard for how long it feels like 10 years, and he hasn't been in the league that long, that he wants a bigger role and that he wants a chance to do more on offense. This is going to be something of that. What it exactly looks like, I'm a little unsure. It just Tibbs is Tibbs. What they do on offense is so predicated on Brunson. It wouldn't shock me if we just get a even more dialed up version of Brunson if Julius Randle ends up getting more touches out of this, and it's really emphasizing those two guys on offense and keeping the core identity of this team more than anything else. But no Barrett, no Quickley just means that there is opportunity. And I would rather OG get those reps than I would say a Josh Hart or a Dante DiVincenzo, or Isaiah Harton, or else you're going to do. Or, maybe this is a chance for Quentin Grimes to do more than stand in the corner and get mad about his role on the team. But OG would seem to be the one that you would logically want to have step in and get to do more of this. That's kind of where I end up thinking about this.
Yeah, I think as far as the usage breakdown probably is going to go, Josh Hart's not an offensive player, right? I know you're just listing guys out, but it's not going to be him. DiVincenzo's not a ball handler.
Yeah, it's just who's on the roster who could eat up opportunities, and they don't have it's funny because Quickley to me was the guy where it's if you wanted to tinker things, or if you move Barrett on in another deal and you wanted to let someone ascend further because you believe in them, Quickley would have been the guy I really wanted to empower. And now you look at the roster and it's maybe it's Grimes, but I don't know if that's exactly what Grimes is as much as I love him. And there's not anyone else on the
Grimes'
roster
usage this year is pretty close to Hart's. He's in a weird spot. I think you would hope that clearing Quickley does some things for him, but you're talking about in letting Barrett go here, that's 27% of possessions. And fortunately for the Knicks, he's not ever been a really high turnover guy. So, like, that's always been somewhat of a positive with him. But still, taking as many shots as he did at a less than 54% true usage, the league average is 58. That's opening up a ton. And so, yeah, probably some more of that goes to Brunson and Randall naturally because they're the best players and the ball is in their hands the most. But this is an opportunity, especially when one of those guys is not on the court, for somebody else to step up. I like the idea of the Knicks playing small, especially with their center woes, but that has never proven to be Tibbs' MO. I think even with Mitchell Robinson out, that we're not going to see, Anunoby at the 4, Randall at the 5, even if that would be a way for, I think, Anunoby to get some run. He's going to have to do it organically within this offense. We know that can be limiting. Just ask Quentin Grimes, right? But this has been a weird year for Anunoby, too. He's taking only a third of his shots at the rim, which is down from last year. He's taking only 19% of his shots from mid, which is down from both of the past 2 seasons. And he's almost half of his shots have been from 3, which is back to like kind of the super role player he was as in the first couple of years of his career. His efficiency has gone up as a result of evening out some of those shot selection things, but he has not played like a guy knocking on the door of more opportunity. So he, just like you were saying about Barrett, I think there is also a little bit of kind of finger crossing here. Because the thing about Anunoby is he's not one of these guys that when the opportunity has arisen, he's seized it. It's always been theoretical, right? So I think considering the kind of strict way that the Knicks run their offense, Quickley was really the only guy who ever kind of freelanced, and that didn't go well for him from a behind the scenes standpoint. Seemingly, it is a very thin needle to thread, I think, for Anunoby, even if the usage opportunities are there, and he's going to need to kind of be as aggressive as he's ever been and prove it quickly, no pun intended, in order for the coaching staff to trust him, at least for the rest of this season. What do you think they pay him? Do you think it's just whatever he wants? Do you think that's already been lined up? I saw Jared Dubin, who covers the league all over the place, tweeted that this summer when OG switched agents, one of the people at CAA that he signed up with is Leon Rose's son. So I think this is probably done. But where do you think it comes in? I guess as a point of comparison, more or less than they already paid RJ Barrett, which was $125 or so.
I'm gonna say more because I just think he's better. I think he's better than RJ Barrett. I would rather pay him like $30 million a year than I would pay RJ Barrett like the mid to upper 20s that he's getting. Right? Funny that it'd be funny, Brendon, if we'd be talking about this trade in a different way, considering there was just the reporting recently about the Knicks and Clutch and some issues doing business there. If OG was still a Clutch guy, does this trade even happen? It's one of those things how weird the league can be behind the scenes with some of this stuff, and now it's he's probably just going to get whatever money he wants because the Knicks are a CAA franchise,
Was that intentional on OG's part? Is this where he wanted to go and he said, okay, that's not going to work for me. Let me hire the big boss's son and I'll get my way to New York. I mean, I don't know. The fact that this trade did not involve much in the way of leaks. Even the beat reporters for these teams, sometimes these deals happen, right? And the beat reporters are like, yeah, I knew they had been talking, but there was nothing concrete, so I didn't have anything to report, but this makes sense. But you're seeing Fred Katz and Eric Koreen at The Athletic and other people being like, well, damn. This is just as much of a shock to me as it is to fans. So the fact that didn't ever get out and there was no real bidding war, yeah, you can make fun of Masai, but maybe Anunoby kind of had a hand in this. I don't know what that means for his contract. I guess it could go either way if he knows he's going to get a big contract, or maybe he's willing to take a little bit of a discount being somewhere he wants to be if there's a relationship there. We know that stuff can factor in. But speaking of Anunoby and previous pathways that his career could have taken, last deadline, we don't know the exact number. I believe with Mikal Bridges, the number reported was 5 first-round picks from certain teams, Chris, so we can maybe assume OG was a little bit shy of that. But the Raptors could have gotten multiple first-round picks and potentially something in the way of player talent for OG Anunoby, they kind of botched it. It's not like he did a lot for them between February and December to help their cause, and now they're getting significantly less for him than they would have.
I was looking at, like, I was trying to find when you said that, like a trade example from last year, and I'm just like wondering what Masai's like end goal here is. Like, what is his end game with this team? It just becomes more and more like confusing to me, you know, because it's so out of line with how so many other teams are building, right? And then you look at like the Knicks side of it as like a point of comparison. It's like, I think it's it's a little bit debatable to me, like what this means for their future trade stuff. But even then, I'm a little more on the side of like, doesn't this make this harder for them to make like the big swing we've been wanting them to make, or like thinking they're going to make for like ever, right? Like what does this mean for like this to me? Like,
well, but hold on, stay on Toronto first.
Yeah. Sorry, my brain's just gobbled. What their big plan to me now is like really. I don't totally like. I get it because it's like you got Quickley and you got Barnes, and like that's two guys I feel great about, and you're gonna pay both of them. So like you're kind of committing to that in the same way like the Knicks are committing to OG. Like I just kind of assume that Quickley's gonna sign for something for very lucrative when you do this. But then I think the next domino to me would just be trade Pascal Siakam, and then you just continue to like get some picks back and some other assets, and then it's about Scottie and Quickley and.
Yeah,
I don't really know how many other guys on this roster matter. Like, how many other guys on this Raptors roster right now really matter to you? If you're Masai Ujiri and you're that coaching staff, I'm trying to look at their full roster now to see if I'm forgetting anyone.
Yeah,
but like,
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, when I was listing off kind of the next shape that the roster can take, they just drafted Grady Dick. You want to see what he is. I mean, a 6'9" guy who can shoot is valuable. What is he, Corey Kispert, or is he more? Is he Cam Johnson? Right, like that's kind of the poles of what that player can be. If he's just Corey Kispert, maybe he isn't in the capital M matter list, and that's the bad part of how they've handled this, I think, and how they've tended to operate in a lot of situations is they don't value the big, glorious blue chip asset when they make roster moves. So they now are rid of Anunoby, and they don't even have, like when the Spurs traded Derek White, remember that? And it was like, okay, it's a weird kind of Spurs move, but wow, they have this 2028 Celtics pick that is top 1 protected that they can swap up to number 1. If everything goes wrong in Boston, that could be pretty valuable, right? It's at least something to like hang your hat on. The Raptors don't even
an all-star, you know.
Exactly. The Raptors don't even have that, right? And so they have to nail this Siakam move. Like when you were asking me what about the Knicks, if they're better now, and now we're kind of asking the same question about the Raptors, which is what you do when there's a trade. To me, the answer really for both is it depends on the next move. I mean, the Raptors getting better isn't really the same as the Knicks getting better because they're moving in opposite directions. Are the Raptors better set up for the future? Are the Knicks better set up for right now? Both of those things are predicated on them nailing the next thing. I think the Knicks do still need a little bit more offensive creation that they lost with Quickley, that they probably needed even before they traded Quickley. So that's still there 100%. For them. The Raptors still need a little bit more in the way of a future asset, somebody where either a player that they can build around next to Barnes or a pathway to getting that player by drafting or trading for them. The Raptors don't have that yet. So it's kind of an incomplete for both, which I guess is why you make a trade on December 30th, so you can go ahead and turn that incomplete to a complete. But that's where I'm at on both sides of this thing, is very curious about what comes next.
Well, and to me, it's interesting. Like when you look at the Toronto roster, it's like you said Grady Dick, and then like there's no one else. There's literally not another young guy on that roster that I'm super interested in. Like Malachi Flynn goes out in the straight. I was kind of like, okay, that he's whatever. Christian Koloko.
He was awful until this year, so yeah, it wasn't going to be him. Christian Koloko has a lung infection that he has had all year. That gets to the point where it's like, is he playing again?
Yeah, 100%. That's where it's going to go. So it's like, I don't know. And then it's like, okay, then it's like the rest of the roster is like Jakob Poeltl and Chris Boucher and Otto Porter, and it's like, okay, maybe just trade a bunch of these guys. The big haul they'll get theoretically is for Siakam. You should also just like trade Gary Trent. Like someone should go get Gary Trent at $18 million on an expiring, even if they get a second for that. Worth it.
It'd be multiple.
Worth it to me. Okay, let's say it's 3 second-round picks. One of them ends up being fake or something. Just trade him, get some assets back. Like you shouldn't be paying Gary Trent's next contract with where you're at unless you just really like believe he's like a locker room guy and whatever. But like trade him tomorrow and get some more lottery tickets, get some scratch offs.
But but they should have They should have done that. All of these things you could have done on one of our first ever shows back in February when we launched the Just Basketball show, and they should have done it then. Instead, they gave up a first round pick for Poeltl, and now are selling a little bit lower on all these guys because they're one step closer to free agency. All of Siakam, Anunoby, and Trent are all expirings now. So they already took a hit on the Anunoby trade. They're likely to do the same with the Siakam or a Trent trade. Are they going to get an asset in any of these moves, even if they got rid of Porter and these aren't. But with the Siakam and the Trent thing, are they going to get anything that you're going to feel like, okay, now that is something you can use to build around Scottie Barnes? Probably not.
No, and you're really banking on this being like, this is now a multi-year process. It probably was anyway, but it's now probably a harder multi-year process because you didn't do this a year ago. That's probably, I think, ultimately the right read on this. And if
Barnes keeps getting better as rapidly as he has, he is headed toward being a number one guy, and that makes everything easier, right? Because there's a lot of, Detroit doesn't necessarily feel like they have a number one guy, even if most of us are still optimistic about Cade. There's a lot of franchises that, Charlotte, right? Like Chicago. There's a lot of teams that are stuck where Washington, they don't have even that yet. So if Barnes becomes that, everything's easier. And I do think there is some value to even incremental moves that shape the franchise more in Barnes' image, which is why I think trading Siakam more than anything they'll get back is vital, because he does not fit with Scottie Barnes, and he never has. But yeah, it is a multi-year thing, and maybe it always was going to be in Toronto. Not every team has the luxury of rebuilding overnight. The Lakers draft well for a couple years and get Anthony Davis. It's not always that easy for everybody, but it's not going to be.
LeBron decides he wants to go to a city like that. Doesn't there's Toronto's a great city, but there's not like an NBA superstar this summer who's like, yes, I would like to go to Toronto. Toronto, that's not going to just rebuild their franchise. That's a good point.
Exactly. So yeah, it's not going to be easy, but maybe in closing here, the Knicks. Next move there. I do think there's more probably coming. I mentioned offensive creation. They also are playing Taj Gibson as their backup center. And
they got Precious.
Precious. He's not a center, really. He's more of like a wing guy.
Well, he's
especially not a
Tibbs
Tibbs center.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not. Tibbs isn't going to be like, hell yeah, brother, Pascal, like Precious at you. You're playing 40 minutes for me. Yeah.
No. So what do you think they do from here? Do you think there's another Anunoby-sized move? Do you think this was the biggest move they'll make before the deadline and everything else will be smaller? We know the Randall contract is a big impediment to anything sizable, and he's playing great, so maybe there's not even a reason to move him. What do you think happens next in New York?
I don't think there's another big trade before this deadline. The name, obviously, that they've been linked to for so long, and can I ask you this before we answer this? Let's go back even further than that. We talked about the Toronto maybe should have done a trade like 6 months ago. Ultimately, should the Knicks have just given up RJ Barrett for Donovan Mitchell?
Yes, obviously.
Okay, so that's the other thing. Maybe teams should just make trades. Don't be precious with your young guys that you drafted for optics' sake. I think teams.
But I also think I don't think Brunson and Mitchell fit.
No,
I'm pretty steadfast on that. So
yeah, sure.
I think value-wise, it's pretty obvious now that holding on to Barrett and even holding on to Grimes probably wasn't worth missing out on Donovan Mitchell purely from a talent standpoint. I don't think long-term that would have worked. So we're all still in a little bit of a limbo evaluating this Knicks build until they get whatever the real second or third star on this team is going to be, and they haven't done that yet. I guess, again, we're kind of back to that incomplete thing. But yeah, obviously, Barrett did not turn into the Mitchell equivalent player that maybe they hoped when they turned that down in September last year.
Okay. So with the Knicks, I think to me this almost makes it harder to make another trade. Yes, Randall has it's only 2 years left on his deal. I think maybe I haven't really realized that enough, but the last year's a player option. So he's going to probably, I would imagine at age 31, he's going to pick up for $29 million. I would just guess he's probably going to take that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's giving him 33 plus million at that age again. So, yeah, you're probably looking at 2 more years beyond this. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that, to me, if I'm certain other teams, unless the picks would, you're almost having to give out so many more picks now to get that kind of trade done. And I think if
you're paying for somebody to take that contract on top of whatever you're paying for the player you're trading him for. Right?
Yeah, and that makes it really hard. If you're calling up the Wolves about Cat, if you're calling the Cavs about Mitchell, if pick another player they might be interested in. Embiid doesn't really feel like it right now, but find another disgruntled player around the league. I think this makes it harder because Quickley would have been the guy. If I was building the dream pack, if I'm Cleveland, for instance, right, and you say at the end of the year Mitchell's like, hey, I'm not signing an extension. Wink, wink. I want to go to the Knicks. We knew this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Trade me there. Okay. The Cavs offer they would have wanted is it started with, I think you would have been asking for Quickley and Grimes picks, and then you don't want Randall's salary, you probably just want RJ's salary. Or something.
Which they don't have
sign and trade Quickley, which they don't have now. So it's now it has to be Randall, it has to be Grimes, and then it has to be a bunch of other picks. And that's just not as good of an offer. And those picks just are probably, if you're trading, the return you're going to get on picks isn't going to be as high because this team's going to be better. So it's I don't think their mobility to make another big trade for the star player we've been wanting them to maybe go get is really there as much anymore. And I think this for Mitchell specifically, I think this makes it less likely that he's a Knick in the summer, which is maybe fine for everyone involved. I think ultimately the Brunson thing is true. Maybe he just signs to maybe he goes to wherever. But I think this in general for the Knicks, this makes their next move to me much less clear about what the next escalation is, what the upgrade would be beyond what this team is right now.
Well, let me just say this. It doesn't have to be Randall, right? Because if they act promptly, they have Evan Fournier making 19 this year and next year. Good God.
We should have. They have Fournier as a lead creator type in the post Quickley. Is he the one who steps into the void? My column, Brendon Kleen.
Yeah, let's watch Olympics 2023 tape.
Yeah, Olympics coming up in his home country. Is it Fournier Renaissance season? You never know. I do know.
Well,
we know
he loudly proclaimed it was about to be heading into the World Cup, and it was not. So probably no. Mitchell Robinson makes 16 this year, 14, and then 13. His contract de-escalates, which is a nice little cherry for a team potentially. Josh Hart, 13 this year, up to 18 next year. And then DiVincenzo fluctuates around 11, 12 for the next 4. So if they stacked multiple of those, you can get to and beyond where Randall is. They have other salary here. I think that's one of the good things about how they've added middling talent, role players over time. Getting Brunson on the contract they did really helped there. So they have some things that they can do that aren't just Randall, and then also they have a lot of picks coming in. They have the Mavs pick this year. They have a future Hornets pick. They have a future Pistons pick, and I believe a future Wizards pick, all kind of on the docket in the coming years. So as well as all of their own. They haven't ever had to deal their own picks for anything. So they're in a position to be the kind of team that bowls you over with, a Suns for Durant type of pick package and beyond that if they want to, or any kind of anything up to that. So it makes it a more narrow pathway to getting that big type of deal done, but they have the salaries and the picks. I think the bigger question to me is, player-wise, they don't really have the crown jewel of a trade that you would want. That's part of why selling a little higher on Barrett would have been smart, because at least then, theoretically, pre-extension and everything else, or maybe he had just signed the extension, there was potential there. Now it's like Grimes' value is at rock bottom, Barrett's gone, and that's kind of the only young talent on the team. So that's the probably biggest inhibitor to whatever their big trade might be, is who's that guy, and other teams have that guy.
And I think if you look at other teams in the market they're going to be competing against, I would look at Miami. It's like Miami didn't do it for Dame, but maybe at some point they do just say, like, okay, we'll give you all of the stuff. And like, I'm more interested in like Jaquez and Hero probably than I am like the Knicks package of young guys at this point. The picks, you tell me I could get a Pistons and Wizards pick, I'm licking my chops a little bit, because those are going to be some really good picks. But if you're a team that feels urgency, wouldn't you? You might say, okay, I would rather have the two players and like lesser picks that I could still trade anyway than I would these like lottery tickets that are 5 years down the line. I think it could be very organizational dependent. And they also are just going to need someone to crack open and like want to move on. Like if you're looking at a world, Brendon, where like the Knicks had options for trades, that also just hasn't broken their way. And maybe that leads to them doing this OG trade. The Sixers like didn't crumble post the Harden stuff. They've been, in fact, I think better. And Embiid's playing at this insane level where it doesn't totally feel like his future in Philly is a concern. The Wolves trading Cat now feels like maybe it's in the summer because of the financial apocalypse heading to their cap sheet. But right now that doesn't feel the likeliest thing in the world. And then, Mitchell's the Mitchell fit thing with Brunson is its own complication if you want to go down that route, even if you have the wings in theory to kind of insulate yourself from some of the defensive concerns. And it's like, okay, then do you want to give up all the stuff for like an older Paul George if the Clippers decide to pivot off of something in the summer? Like, that's not really exactly what I'd really want to do. Like, I'd want to aim a little bit younger. There's not like an obvious thing that is broken in their direction to go do in the way that like even like the Bucks, we didn't necessarily know that they were going to go do this Dame thing, but in retrospect, the market kind of broke for them to go make that kind of move. You kind of need the market to break for you. Yeah, with these star trades. I mean, the Knicks with a year ago, the only reason the Cavs got into it was like it was reported like a couple days before that they had talked to the Jazz about it, and the Knicks didn't go through with it, and Mitchell was clearly gone. So the market broke for them, and they took an opportunity to do it. You kind of have to have that happen. The Suns get Kevin Durant because the Nets imploded, and there's an opportunity to get Kevin Durant via trade. That has to happen for the Knicks, and I don't know what the obvious perfect fit for them would be in that sense.
Well, the thing is, it's not obvious, right? I mean, that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah, so right now we don't know, and they definitely at least are going to be in those conversations and theoretically have an attractive landing spot with a, maybe second tier or third tier MVP candidate is probably not much to say. Second tier MVP candidate in Brunson, who continues to get better. His threes are going in even more this season and feels like a legitimate offensive engine on a great contract that they deserve a lot of credit for. And we just went through that they have some flexibility to make whatever that move might be. It's just, from the Fournier thing to, the fact that eventually those picks stop being picks and end up becoming players who may or may not pan out. They're in this window where they probably are going to continue to act aggressively. And that, honestly, like maybe my closing thought would be, I love that they understood that. That they understood that they're not good enough. And as cute as this let's be respectable stuff is when you're the Knicks that used to be a joke, it's kind of what the Kings are facing down. It only lasts for so long. You can only be the nice, new, cool story that everybody respects but doesn't fear for so long. And then push comes to shove and you got to make some uncomfortable decisions and say goodbye to Immanuel quickly and, kick things into the next gear. So I like that they did that, even if the future remains a little bit uncertain for them. So I'm excited to watch this team. I think they'll be better, and, there's probably more to come.
They're now they have been, but I think they're further entrenched as just one of the more interesting players, or in as far as the trade market goes and where this goes. Brendon, I'm very excited to see kind of what aggressively they decide to do or what they decide not to do. Let me ask you one last question before we go. Knicks ultimately do they finish in the top 6 of the East?
I would think so.
Okay, it's just gonna like someone is going to be left really disappointed amid but like Miami feels like to me like the most ascendant of the teams in that 4 to 7 cluster. But it's the Heat at 19 and 12 right now, the Magic at 19 and 12, the Cavs at 18 and 14, who've been playing really well of late for what it's worth, amid all these injuries, and then the New York Knicks at 17 and 14, the Pacers at 16 and 14 have certainly not been quite as good post-season tournament, but maybe there's a turnaround coming with Tyrese Halliburton like having a 20 assist 0 turnover game recently.
Yeah.
Someone's just going to be pissed off amid that group.
Sure, and that's going to happen in the West too. I think if I'm picking, I just trust the Knicks over the course of a full season with their roster more than the Cavs' current situation.
I agree.
Considering the injuries and trade uncertainty around that team. And I don't trust the Pacers' defense at all. So I don't buy that they're going to be able to stack up wins that it's going to require to, stabilize into that top 6 and put some distance between themselves and their competition. So I'd probably say the Knicks get that last spot, and the Cavs and Pacers are both in the play-in, along with whoever grasps the 9 and 10, which I guess Brooklyn has the inside track on 9, but 10 is kind of who cares, really, I guess would be the best way to put the 10 seed in the Eastern Conference. But yeah, it'll be fascinating. There's a lot still to come in terms of trades and everything else. That will do it for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show.
Knicks Sixers round 1 would be, if the Knicks end up, let's say, at 6.
Yeah.
Knicks Sixers round 1 would be grimy in a very fun way. I'd be into that.
Grimy. Pun intended.
Grimesy,
okay, hit subscribe on this YouTube channel if it's your first time finding us. Hope you enjoyed our instant reaction to OG Anunoby heading to the New York Knicks. We'll be back on Tuesday with more Just Basketball Show. Until then, enjoy the hoops.